For the next few months, all through the spring, summer, and autumn of 1930, the Sirocco crawled up the coast. We stopped every day or two at one or another of the ports. We were short of cash, and we were in all kinds of sea trouble. My letters to my father, while the Sirocco moved northward through the reefy waters of the Australian coast, make strange reading. It was around that time when I affected the air of a man of distinction, I suppose, for I addressed my notes to father as Dear Potter. No matter, Potter never got dull letters from me. If I didn't ask him for money and excite him that way, I hinted about my last jailing or the most recent visit to some house of special integrity. We reached Townsville on the northeastern coast of Australia. Sirocco, Townsville, 27th July 1930. Dear Potter, we're leaving tomorrow morning at 2 a.m. direct to Cooktown. A couple of days there. Out to Lizard Island for a day or so, and then the piece de resistance, Samurai, or in the event of a cyclone, Davy Jones' Locker. I suppose you're wondering what became of us at Rockhampton and how we managed to exist. The answer to the second is that by the dint of judicious advertising set forth, the mystery and lure of the tropics, I managed to recruit a fifth member of the crew and separate him from 50 Ironmen. He has more cash than that, is a hard worker, and can do almost anything he sets his hands to, so my conscience is not crying aloud to me in the dead of the night. As regards our stay in Rockhampton, I blush to admit that my lucid intervals were not sufficiently frequent nor of long enough duration to permit of any detailed description of the city. I plainly remember noticing, however, that a pub graces the corner of each street, causing such a sameness of perspective to the stranger that geography becomes a very necessary adjunct. Met bad company there, two of the most wonderful journalists on the local paper, one of them a red rag communist, especially in wine, the other an ex-footman at the government house. Among other things, both of them very clever fellows and delightful company. Walker, the communist, was once a member of the underworld, Scuzzy Taylor's gang, and a pug of no little Wrentown. He it was who, in a drunken moment, arranged for me to fight Bud Riley, who was in Jimmy Sharman's troupe. How Sharman came up to me, grabbed me by the hand, and told me to be outside his tent the next afternoon at 3, thus giving me the first intimation that I was booked to fight on the morrow, and to be ready to accept Bud Riley's challenge. How I, being at the time prepared to fight Dempsey and Tunney both together, for such effect has fire water on the brain of man, agreed, and how the next day, being in much the same mood, took the biggest hiding in my life, but managed to stay the prescribed 3 rounds and collect £5 from the chagrined Sharman, is all too long and a sad story. I couldn't eat for a couple of days, but it's a story I'll never forget in all the days of my life, and which I'll have to tell you about when we next meet. We had the J.C. Williamson chorus out with us on the river, caused the Sirocco to look like a flagship or river excursion steamer, a merry day with young maidens everywhere from stern to stern. One of them, by the way, a little girl named Ray Fisher, knew you, having stayed at Pressland House a few months ago, but she wouldn't have anything to do with me when she discovered I wasn't a Catholic, but was a Protestant renegade. And when I attempted to instill into her a few of the principles of agnosticism, she regarded me as a thing unclean, but promised to tell some beads for me the next morning. Tell them what? I don't think I'll be able to return to Sydney for a long time because of Naomi. I haven't got to the moral courage to write her a straight letter telling her it's no go, and in the meantime, we're officially engaged in the papers. Of course, it's hardly her fault either, and although I didn't suggest the married state, I just allowed things to drift away. Now look at the mess. I've been in them before, but never to this extent. Love, from your son, Errol. About 3 weeks later, the Sirocco arrived at Cooktown, the last port of any consequence at the northernmost tip of Australia. From there, we would make the sea jump to the southern tip of New Guinea. My letters to my father in the New Guinea period are down to about 10 that are extant, and this is the one I sent to him as we prepared to head for the New Guinea mainland. Sirocco, Cooktown, 17th August 1930. Dear Potter, we're leaving for Lizard Island day after tomorrow, and we'll probably put in the night there cooking a goat and 2 fowls I captured here. Chased the confounded goat for a mile before I cornered him. The fowls, both of them noble birds, died all unaware of approaching fate until plucked from their perch in the dead of night by the neck. One must live, a communistic tenet which I heartily support. I'll certainly send you a cable as soon as we arrive in Samurai, wherever you are. But of course, Dad, there's not the slightest need for concern. It's a good time of the year now, no cyclones about, and even if bad weather is encountered, the prevailing winds are all from the south, and we can run before them. As I mentioned in my telegram, I shall probably make up towards Dutch New Guinea. From reports I've heard, things are bad in mandated territory, while in the Dutch there is practically no authority at all, a condition eminently suitable to a humble adventurer seeking the elusive shekel. But one thing I've made my mind up on. When I've got a credit balance of several hundred, I'm going to take myself to Cambridge to study history and literature. I've been coming to the conclusion for a long time that the most vital thing in life is to be able to understand about it. God, what profundity, eh? All my love and respect, Dad. From Errol. We piloted our ship into the rather fine harbor of Port Moresby. We arrived during the rainy season, and the whole area was brilliant green. The region seemed beautiful to me, and I poked around searching its resources. About 30 miles from the port, the Laoloki River flowed through an emerald countryside. I fell in love with it. My partners made their way back to Australia, but I decided to settle there. With funds I collected from the sale of the Sirocco, I started a tobacco plantation. First, I built a rather comfortable large house of the local materials, palm and bamboo, in which to live. The lodging was along the banks of the river, and it went up swiftly with the aid of my Kanaka labor staff. Within a week or two, I was ensconced in a place roomy enough for me to move about in, with plenty of shelves for books, tables and chairs for company, and a decent bed. Around me, from Laoloki to Port Moresby, was a territory plentiful with nutmeg, rattan cane, the okari nut, bananas, mangrove, coconuts, and sandalwood. There were fish in the river, and the natives brought food to my door. For a penny or two, I could have the fruit of the region. Tobacco was not being grown hereabouts. The earth seemed suitable to it, and Australia might be the market. This crop had advantages. You could grow it in a season and didn't have to wait 10 years for it to mature as you did with coconuts. For months, I went from daylight to dusk, keen on becoming a planter. It was great to construct things and to watch the place grow under my guidance and management and ignorance. I borrowed a government tractor to open up the soil. One of the natives ran it very well, and I watched as the machine moved industriously along the banks of the Lailoki. I wrote feverish letters to my father, telling him of my work, how I built a curing barn, directing the native labor, and how I modeled a furnace to use in curing the tobacco. I learned about it from books sent to me from America and from other planters. As always, when I didn't know what to do, I yelled, "Boss boy, carry on." And the foreman of my tobacco workers knew how to direct his men down the long rows of seed beds. Often, I would stop and look at the great field that was growing, with slashes of cheesecloth shades protecting the tobacco beds. It wasn't easy. Getting a furnace to operate just about turned me gray, figuratively anyway, but it appeared we were going about it the right way, for other planters came around and saw how the tobacco grew, and were good enough to observe, reluctantly, "Flynn, you deserve to succeed, anyway, if only because you're too ignorant to know better." There was only one thing wrong. I was alone. Too much alone. The only white man for miles around, and sometimes I got tired reading books and was restless. One day, my boss boy, Alaman, took me inland a few miles to his village. As we came into the little colony of bamboo and palm covered huts, a girl ran forward. I hadn't known Alaman had a daughter. Her shoulders were almost ripe corn, and her hair, which wasn't crinkly, reached down to them. She wore a grass skirt, and that was all. Above her lava garment, her little up-pointing breasts were so symmetrical and perfect as to have been attached by some means I didn't stop to explain to myself. Her skin was like shining satin, a color of light mahogany, and as I stared at those up-pointing breasts, my breath held. Or must I resurrect the cliche that my heart stood still? I just stared at her and could only gulp. I knew I had to buy her. I had to have her. Her eyes looked downward to the ground. I didn't realize she was terribly embarrassed, and I was also fitful with a shyness I was a long time in overcoming. I had to have this downcast-eyed little woman, or girl, whichever, for there is no such thing as age in New Guinea. A girl generally matures at about 12. You can tell such a girl is mature by her actions, her looks. You can also tell she is a woman by the way she keeps the mosquitoes off your back with bush herbs. Tupercelli. What a beautiful name, I said in pigeon talk slowly. When I bought her off Alaman for 2 pigs, 1 fuse of English shillings, called fuse because the bank wrapped them so that they looked like a plug of dynamite, and some seashell money, I didn't know that she hated me. It appeared that she had a boyfriend in the village, a handsome chap, and she didn't want to leave him, but I was some time in learning that. She was absolutely beautiful, but at first sulky. I could see she resented me very much. She had been sold into slavery for me, for I knew that that was what it amounted to, so I must woo her and show her that I was no harsh owner. We returned to my tobacco plantation, and I set about for the next few days trying to change her opinion of me. A little kindness, a little sweetness, and she softened. After a couple of days, finding I was not the kind of monster she had expected, she shyly drew closer, became attentive in a servant's kind of way. She could sing, but never gaily, only sadly and lugubriously. She could dance, but her dancing wasn't much. She seemed so tense. Her nerves seemed to come out of the ends of her palms. I could see by the way she twisted her hands. At night, when I came back from the tobacco plantation, It was touching to sit down to rest, and she came over to me, kneeled before me, and washed my feet, toe by toe. As she did this, I would look at her pleading eyes, and I didn't feel like reading. In the evening, sitting there trying to read in the light of a hurricane lamp, lost in Maeterlinck, the writer naturalist popular in that day, I could feel her presence close by. Then she would come and wash my back with scented bush herbs and water, running her hands softly over my back. I forgot Maeterlinck. Nobody else had ever done this to me, and I thought I sensed tenderness beneath her fingertips. A few days later, as her sense of familiarity increased, and I made no move toward her sexually, she took it upon herself to wash my hands between my fingers. She didn't care if my fingernails were grimy, because she knew I had been working. By now, her expression changed. We could look at each other squarely and honestly, and there was an emotion between us. I knew this, and she knew this, though she had been sold to me. What she feared now was that her father might want to take her back to their village. She was delightful, especially when she took my big paw in both of her little hands, when she pinpointed flowers in her hair and put shells around her head. Her hips were slender, her legs long. Mostly we stared at each other and spoke in many syllables, each learning word by word the other's language. Tuberceli was almost scentless, a bit like hibiscus. Occasionally, as we hung about our house or moved by the river, there wafted over us the fragrance of frangipani, and the rich, harsh smell drove me wild. How do you tell a Melanesian, I want to go to bed with you? How do you say, but look, if you don't want to go to bed with me, I understand. Please give me an answer. I had an interpreter, the cook, since I didn't speak the Mutuan language that well then, and I suppose the cook screwed it all up because I didn't make much headway with the beauty. How do you tell somebody who doesn't speak your language, oh, Tuberceli, you're beautiful, and I love the way you put your hand in mine. I like the way we go swimming. How do I tell you that I am filled with emotion? In the Mutuan language, numbering about 300 words, there is no such word as emotion. Yet, in a way, we had long conversations, neither of us knowing the language of the other. She caught on to some of my English words. The word swim. Very good. So down the river we went to swim. She repeated the word crocodile, and she would make a gesture with her two hands simulating the jaws of the creature. We swam and drifted in the shallow Leiloki River. Its name meant goodbye, and when it twisted and traveled, it seemed almost to say goodbye. I shall always hear you, Leiloki of my younger days. Goodbye. Is that what you murmured? We would let ourselves be carried down by the current of the stream, and on the shores, in a secluded nook of shade, at last we made love. I can only say that I don't know when again my heart pounded so. The river curved. It went in a strange curve, a bend like a big python. One day, Tuberceli let out a yell of fright. There was a log in the river. I jumped on it and paddled as hard as I could to where she had put a spear through the head of a small crocodile. The creature was 5 or 6 feet long, and she had planted the spear right between his eyes. Tuberceli was enchanted when I looked at the gruesome sight of the blood flowing down the river. She pointed at the still living croc, shouting and dancing, so that those little breasts jumped up and down. She was like a child as, her two hands clasped together, she called out in the Mutuan language, "There he dies! There he dies!" We stripped this crocodile, and she cooked him that night. He was delicious, like a young tender lobster or crayfish. Sometimes I frolicked with Tupercelli by the river banks, or lay with her in the soft sand at the shore. I thought I heard or sensed the subtle gura gura mystique of the region. Little people, they said, like the leprechauns of Ireland, who watched out for you. Maybe it was only the eyes of the Melanesian natives spying on us. Tubercali and I drifted. So, in our language of gestures, our smiles, closeness, Tubercali and I made love, and it was a beautiful thing. I was less alone, and soft-aired Lelokai River is one of my most precious poetic memories. I was myself now, and for a while I even turned away from books. The only conclusion I can draw is that a man and a woman should never speak the same language. One ship sails east, the other west, by the self-same gales that blow. 'Tis the set of the sails, and not the gales, that shows you the way to go. That is just about the inner theme of my life, I suppose. Those lines have often gone through my mind, so much so that I might ever have written them, might even have written them. One day, as I watched the tobacco fields in full leaf and wondered whether I'd be able to cure the crop properly and then sell it, a cable arrived from Tahiti, forwarded from Sydney, 3,000 miles below. Tahiti. Mr. Errol Flynn, Sailor's Rest, Woolloomooloo, Sydney. Offer you £50, all expenses, come at once, play part of Fletcher Christian in picture entitled In the Wake of the Bounty Being Made Tahiti. Cable collect. Joel Schwartz. Schwartz had said he would get in touch with me someday. Now here it was. I would be in film. Suddenly, my personal heritage seemed to pay off. Shades of Midshipman Young, who had been companion to Fletcher Christian during the mutiny of the Bounty. I stared at the tobacco field, all my fortune in it, all my labor of several months. The leaves were green. The sun was warming the crop. I could smell the tobacco leaf. I called my boss boy and rapid talked in pidgin, the language of Papau, and made up of German, English, and Melanesian words. Alaman, you fella, big boss. I go make ship. I motioned with the fingers of my two hands the number of weeks I might be gone, 8 or 10. I tabudada. You fella mek tobak job. I tabudada. You fella care for him house. I tabudada. You fact take care to Porcelli. Yes, tabuda. Alaman tek. Keep for tabudada. I went to Port Moresby, called Schwartz, and took ship northward to the famed Tahiti in the Polynesian Isles. For 3 weeks, I worked with Schwartz in the picture, without the least idea of what I was doing, except that I was supposed to be an actor. We made much of the film in Matavai Bay, where 140 years earlier, Captain Bligh had anchored in the Bounty. I was startled to note that I could remember the lines I had to say. I could commit lines to memory and not falter. There were just so many that had to be mastered each day. It was a big discovery in a way. The experience came swiftly, and it seemed to go swiftly. But it was different from anything I had ever done before. So much at variance with digging earth, selling Kanakas the idea of becoming workers, carrying guns for real in the gold fields. I had touched on something that the world called an art form, and it had affected me deeply. It was my first movie job, and I was never able to convince people of it. When I arrived in Hollywood later and mentioned that I bore this relationship to Fletcher Christian's companion, and that I had had my beginnings in a film playing the part of Christian, they looked at me as if with unbelief. Nor did they believe that I came from Tasmania, Australia, and New Guinea. No one believed anything else I ever said about my life and adventures in that part of the world. The most notable disbeliever was the famous Mark Hellinger, who, when I got to know him and filmed him, would come around to see me just to listen to my stories. He thought I was a magnificent liar, a modern Baron Munchausen with a wonderful imagination. He would listen and try not to have a spasm. When I confronted this strange look of incredulity in When I confronted this strange look of incredulity in one person after another in Hollywood, when I saw that they all wanted to believe I was an Irish lad grown up in Ireland and come over straight from Ireland, when I saw that this was what the world wanted to believe, what newspapermen themselves wanted to believe, I thought, let 'em. I'll deny nothing. Someday, I said to myself, I'll tell the whole damned story anyway, if anyone's curious.